Calling all stronger fighters. Live or die. Expert fighters are waiting to fight you. These were the original taglines when Fatal Fury, first in the series, came out on Neo Geo way back in 1991. The Fatal Fury King of Fighters was released in Japan as Garo Densetsu Shukemai no Tatakai, or Legend of the Hungry Wolf, the Battle of Destiny. It's, of course, a 1991 head-to-head fighting game much in the vein of Street Fighter 2, which, of course, is by no mere coincidence. The creator of the original Street Fighter, Takashi Nishiyama, actually left Capcom and joined SNK, and this was his first game. Some of the ideas that he had for Street Fighter actually ended up coming to Fatal Fury, the King of Fighters. The basic plot of Fatal Fury basically centers around a martial arts tournament known as the King of Fighters. It's held in the fictional city of Southtown, which many believe it's basically Miami, Florida, that general area, and it's sponsored by the local crime boss Geese Howard. Years prior to the event, Geese did murder both Terry and Andy Bogart's, two of the main characters' father. In this game, you can choose between Andy Bogart, Terry's younger brother, the aforementioned titular character, Terry Bogard, and their best friend, Joe Higashi, a Muay Thai kickboxing champion from Japan. The game follows a pretty typical head-on-head fighter as far as one-on-one. It does control, of course, using an 8-directional joystick and 3 buttons: punch, kick, and a line button. That line button basically means you can either hop into the foreground or hop into the background. The input for special moves are pretty standard. They're either going to be charge moves or pretty much fireball or half circle motions, much like Street Fighter. This game started a craze, and I think, honestly, with all the different ports that it has received through the years, it is nice to play this game. Arcade perfect. I did actually originally have it on the Neo Geo many years later once I became an adult, but actually ended up selling most of my Neo Geo collection, as I ended up picking up on the Switch via the ACA releases. And I also, of course, do have it with my Neo Geo MVSX, released by Unico. But back then, the main ports we had were, of course, the Super Famicom, the Sega Genesis, and this game also does have 7 different backgrounds. And each background is tied to a character that you would face. Pow Pow Cafe, Sound Beach, Howard Arena, the West Subway, Happy Park, Dream Amusement Park, and Southtown Village. The game itself, I would say, has not aged as well, and over the next 2 weeks, I'll actually be focusing on both the second game and Fatal Fury Special, which is a more revamped version of Fatal Fury 2. So what I'll probably do for the next video is mix those two together, as it just makes a lot more sense. The game itself, again, as I mentioned, did not quite age very well. It was great for its time. It was definitely much better than Street Fighter, the original game. But comparing it to Street Fighter 2, I will say Street Fighter 2, of course, had more characters and controlled better. But then, of course, Street Fighter 2 did release a year later. The game also did come out on the Wii Virtual Console as well. And, of course, most folks can buy it now for $4.99 to $5.99. Easily off the $4.99 to $7.99 off the Switch shop. You can also get it, of course, on the Xbox and PSN stores as well. This is definitely a great game of nostalgia, and I definitely supported picking up the game, as I want to make sure that SNK receives their due royalties for keeping these games, still in most people's mind, especially for new battlers or new fans to the fighting genre. SNK is still definitely one of my favorite fighting game companies next to Capcom. My main respect, of course, growing up was I was a huge fan of Capcom, more SNK. But as I got older, I definitely recognized what SNK was able to do on just one piece of hardware, whereas Capcom actually had their games and their series over 3 different hardware generations. So just the fact that SNK or SNK Playmore was able to wring out so much gameplay, graphics, and sound out of arcade system, home system that came out in 1989, or developed in 1988, 1989, is quite amazing. As I mentioned, the controls here are fairly well done. It is definitely a quarter muncher. I remember fighting in the arcade, especially with busted buttons and sometimes a joystick that would stick, just getting absolutely decimated by Terry's master, Tung Fu Yu, who you see now on screen, who's definitely a bit of a Master Roshi character. Uh, One of the other things that's nice about the Fatal Fury series is that between each round, the stages will actually change as far as either time of day or even different weather effects, which brought over into the King of Fighters series. This game is a wonderful trip down memory lane. Uh, though, if I admit playing that with a bit of, you know, rose tinted glasses, that's what I do see. Playing it again after so many years later, it's a bit tough to really get used to the gameplay again, since it isn't quite as smooth, of course, as Street Fighter 2. That said, I spent many hours on my Sega Genesis, definitely wearing out my gamepad. This did, of course, come out on the Genesis when it had the three-button pad, which was fun since the game only needed three buttons. And as you can see here, the different line options, which is nice because you can also, dodge special attacks if you can read the animations beforehand. The game itself is a bit more responsive than the original Street Fighter, which makes sense as it did come out 3 years later, or is it 2 years later actually? But definitely not as responsive as Street Fighter 2. But they, of course, did change that just a year later in 1992 when Fatal Fury 2 was released, which still was a bit rushed, which is why they released Fatal Fury Special. As you can see, the wonderful part about the Neo Geo arcade unit is going back to 91, so many years ago. Having these large sprites, of course, this didn't quite have the zooming feature or scrolling feature that the Art of Fighting or Samurai Showdown series had, but still very impressive. The frames of animation, great soundtrack. One of my favorite stages is Sound Beach and also Pow Pow Cafe, as you can actually hear the chants from the backup band in the background stage. And if you look at each of the Fatal Fury games, there's going to be little kind of Easter egg and nods with characters as the series progresses. It also, of course, has bonus rounds, which Street Fighter 2 did have as well, but this one was mainly a arm wrestling bonus round, which, again, another button masher in order to win. And of course, it got progressively harder as it got to each of the 3 bonus rounds. Geese in this game is an absolute beast and is really hard to beat. Still, this game just brings back so many smiles just watching this. What I will definitely say is this game, since I am playing it on the ACA Switch, I originally tried using the Hori Fight Stick, and while I could put off some of the moves, but for some reason some of them just didn't quite come across, so I ended up actually using the analog stick on the Neo Geo, not Geo, the Nintendo Pro Controller, and which is also very smooth. So that was a little bit easier, but definitely not arcade perfect. I just wish that ACA or whoever did the programming would update all the ACA Neo Geo games to be compatible with the Neo Geo arcade stick that was released for the Neo Geo X. That would definitely bring it pretty much to that next level when it comes to getting that Neo Geo feel. It is still an emulation, and with that, it's not going to be 100%. But for $5 to $8 for an arcade perfect title, close to arcade perfect title, it's definitely more than I definitely got more than my money's worth. Especially considering that when it was released on the Super Nintendo Genesis, it was $59.99, and of course when it was released on the original Neo Geo back in the day, you were looking at $199 for this game. So a great trip back to nostalgia time. As you can see here, I'm fighting Duck King. Great soundtrack to the stage. Not doing too badly, and as you can see there, the little train that stops by. Graphics are a bit more cartoony. As the series progresses, it gets a bit grittier, and then later on in the Real Bout series, it goes for more of an anime look. The nice thing between each rounds, you do of course also get some of the special moves as far as how to actually do the special moves. Here is the actual bonus round, and this one I completely lost. I was really mashing the buttons to try and get this, but unfortunately I did not make it. As you can see here, definitely lost, and we go to the next stage. And there's another special move that you can learn. And that was a wonderful thing about SNK and in general when it comes to their fighters. They would actually tell you what the extra, special moves are instead of trying to figure it out or find out in like it was in Street Fighter. No, Street Fighter 2, that is. And I often wonder after seeing this character if Adon is a nod to this character. And as you can see, as I mentioned, the stage transitions in between. And I will say with the very first game, because it was difficult to land some of the special moves in the arcade, when they did hit, they did quite a bit of damage. Combos weren't that extensive. Of course, again, this was one of the original fighting game series, so they weren't quite as extensive as they are today. But still, very well done. Alright, beat another character. And here is Geese, the titular character, antagonist of the game, who uses a mixture of his own. It looks like he's wearing an Aikido gi, but he's actually got his own style of fighting. And I absolutely get pummeled by Raiden here. He does a lot of damage. He does way more damage than Zangief. That was also definitely one of the other things between this and Street Fighter, is that a lot of times the early SNK fighting games did take a lot of the bosses or enemies did definitely took a lot of damage as far as off your life when getting hit. And you could not air guard either. And there we go, there you see me losing. I'll try again. Mainly during this gameplay I am using Terry. He is one of my favorite characters. And then next I did try to use Joe, I believe, in one of the later fight scenes. I actually didn't like Andy as much until much later, until he hit the Real Bout series. Alright everyone, and with that I will actually be cutting this video off shortly. I will be getting my butt handed to me by Raiden here. And I will continue to get my butt handed to me by Raiden for the rest of the few rounds. For some reason I just could not get past him. Again, as I mentioned, for the next video I'll be focusing and mixing some video of Fatal Fury 2 and Fatal Fury Special for the next one, since they're basically the same game, just one Fatal Fury Special is a bit more updated and balanced than Fatal Fury 2 was. So I will show that. Until next time, thanks everyone for watching this quick overview review on my channel. Again, I will be doing a bit more of these. I'm going to try to release one video each weekend when it comes to some retro games. So of course, as I mentioned, I'll be starting off with the Neo Geo Fatal Fury series. So I'll go 1 through 3, or the first third, and then I'll switch over to Samurai Shodown and probably hop back a little bit in between different games. And also we'll hop back between either playing it on the Switch on Untitled Chapter or playing it off the Neo Geo MVSX. And again, thanks everyone. Please like and subscribe. Hope everyone is staying safe.